I welcome you all to today's lecture on dower under Muslim law. Dower is one of the important components of marriage under Muslim law. To understand the institution of Muslim marriage, one must learn the concept of dower in detail. Therefore, in this lesson, we will discuss the following issues relating to dower: definition and nature of dower, kinds of dower, fixation of dower, and enforcement of dower. Definition and nature of dower. Unfortunately, the Islamic concept of meher has been widely misunderstood. Those who are obsessed with the contractual element in Muslim concept of marriage regard it as consideration. Those who are more familiar with dowry confuse it with the same. The fact is that meher is neither consideration nor dowry. It has a unique position of its own. To understand the Muslim concept of dower thoroughly, let us go through some of the definitions of dower by eminent jurists of Islamic law. According to Tayyibji, dower or meher is a sum that becomes payable by the husband to the wife on marriage, either by agreement between the parties or by operation of law. Sir Abdul Rahim defines it as: dower is either a sum of money or other form of property to which the wife becomes entitled by marriage. It is an obligation imposed by law on the husband as a mark of respect for the wife. According to Bailey, dower is not the exchange or consideration given by the man to the woman for entering into the contract, but an effect to the contract imposed by the law on her husband as a mark of respect to its subject, the woman. Justice Mahmood defines dower as follows: dower under Muhammadan law is a sum of money or other property promised by the husband to be paid or delivered to the wife in consideration of the marriage. Even while no dower is expressly fixed or mentioned at the marriage ceremony, the law confers the right of the dower upon the wife. He further elaborates this point as under: dower may be regarded as a consideration for connubial intercourse by way of analogy to the contract or sale. This observation is subject to serious doubt, as Sir Abdul Rahim correctly points out that it is not a consideration in the modern sense of the term, but an obligation imposed by the law upon the husband as a mark of respect to the wife. We know that if dower were a consideration, it would always be prompt and specified, but the law allows deferred dower which is payable on the dissolution of marriage. And even when it is not expressly fixed or mentioned at the marriage ceremony, the law confers the right of dower upon the wife. The law provides that dower can be fixed before, at the time of, or after the marriage. Dower is therefore different from consideration. It is in fact an effect to the contract imposed by law on the husband. In Nasra Begum versus Rizwan Ali, the court held that where there has been an agreement between the parties at the time of their marriage with regard to the amount of dower payable by the husband to the wife, the payment of such dower amount becomes recoverable under agreement. We know that the binding character of dower is that it has been divinely ordained. The true nature of dower can be found in the Holy Quran itself. Holy Quran uses the word sadaqah for dower. Sadaqah is a derivative of siddiq, which means truth, regularity, and friendship. Dower in this Quranic sense is the symbol of truthfulness and regularity of the friendship of husband and the wife. Dower is to strengthen cooperation between the spouses and add to the dignity of the woman. Kinds of dower. We know that dower is payable whether the sum has been fixed at the time of the marriage or not. Thus, dower may be either specified or unspecified. If the dower is specified, then again it may be asked that when it is payable. Thus, we have the following kinds of dower in Islam. Number 1, specified dower. Number 2, unspecified dower. Specified dower may again be divided into number 1, prompt dower. Number 2, deferred dower. Specified dower. The dower which the parties to the marriage may fix by stipulation is called specified dower. Usually the dower is fixed at the time of the marriage, and the qazi performing the ceremony enters the amount in the register. or else there may be a regular contract called Kabin-nama with numerous conditions. The sum may be fixed either at the time of the marriage or later. The amount of dower may be fixed by the father if the son is minor or of unsound mind, and a father's contract on behalf of a minor son is binding on the minor. In the Hanafi school, the rule is that the dower as fixed by the father is binding on the son, and the father has no personal liability to pay it. But among the Shias, the rule is that if the son has no means to pay it, the father is liable. In case of Sayyid Shabir Hussain versus Farzand Hassan, a Shia father had made himself surety for the payment of meher of his minor son. Thereafter he died. It was held that the estate left by the deceased was liable for the payment of his son's dower. Accordingly, in this case, each heir was made responsible for a portion of the wife's claim in proportion to the share received by a particular heir on distribution of the estate of the deceased. Where the amount has been specified, the husband will be compelled to pay whole of it, however excessive it may seem to the court, having regard to the husband's means. Now we know that when dower is specified, the question arises at what time and in what proportion is the amount payable. On this basis, dower has been classified as prompt and deferred. Prompt dower. The technical term for prompt dower is mu'ajjal. It is derived from a root meaning to hasten, to precede. The term mu'ajjal therefore means that which has been hastened or given priority in point of time. Prompt dower is payable immediately after the marriage if demanded by the wife. The prompt dower may be realized by the wife at any time before or after the consummation of the marriage. The consummation of marriage or living with the husband is not necessary condition for claiming it. The demand should be specified and not conditional or ambiguous. The payment of prompt dower may be postponed until there is an actual demand by the wife. The wife may refuse to live with her husband and admit to her sexual intercourse so long as the prompt dower is not paid. If the husband sues her for restitution of conjugal rights before sexual intercourse takes place, non-payment of prompt dower is a complete defense to the suit and the suit will be dismissed. The heirs of a woman are entitled to it as forming part of her estate, even though she might not have demanded it from her husband when alive. Deferred dower. The deferred dower is payable on the termination of marriage by death or divorce. It has not become prompt by the demand of the wife during the continuation of marriage. But if there is any agreement as to the payment of deferred dower earlier than the dissolution of the marriage, such an agreement would be valid and binding. The interest of the wife in the deferred dower is a vested one and not a contingent one. It is not liable to be displaced by the happening of any event, not even on her own death, and as such her heir can claim the money if she dies. Whether the dower shall be prompt or deferred is primarily a matter of contract between the parties. When there is such a contract, such portion of dower as is agreed to be prompt shall be prompt and the rest shall be deferred. But when it has not been specified, there is a difference of opinion as to whether the whole of it shall be presumed to be prompt or only a part of it. Among Shias, whole dower is presumed as prompt. Under Hanafi school of thought, whole of the dower may be promptly awarded, but where the agreement is silent on the question, the usage of the wife's family is the main consideration, and in the absence of the proof of custom, the presumption is that one half is prompt and the other half deferred, and the portion may be changed to suit individual cases. Unspecified dower. Unspecified dower is that dower not specified at the time of marriage or after divorce. We know the obligation to pay dower is a legal responsibility on the part of her husband and is not dependent upon any contract between the parties. Where the dower is specified, it has to be paid accordingly. But where the dower has not been settled at the time of marriage or after, what are the principles upon which the amount of dower is to be determined? The customary or proper dower of woman is to be fixed with reference to the social position of her father's family and her own personal qualification. The Hidayah lays down the importance of the rule that her age, beauty, fortune, understanding, and virtue must be taken into consideration. The Islamic law therefore safeguards the rights of a wife and attempts to ensure her an economic status consonant with her own social standing. The husband may at any time after the marriage increase the dower. Likewise, the wife has the power remitting the whole or a portion of the dower in favor of her husband or his heirs. Remission of dower is valid even if made without consideration, provided the wife is a major and of sound mind. In case of Ali versus Muhammad, Madras High Court, and in Muzammun Nisa versus Sirajuddin, the High Court of Patna took the view that for the purposes of remission of dower, the age of majority should be reckoned with under the Indian Majority Act, that is, the wife should have completed the age of 18 years. But in Qasim versus Kaniz, the Allahabad High Court expressed the opinion that the age of majority is to be determined under Muslim law on a strict interpretation of the provisions of the Indian Majority Act. The view of the Allahabad High Court is correct, but socially the better view is that of Patna and Madras High Court. However, it is to be kept in mind the remission of a dower must be made by the wife by her free consent. The wife has also the power of reducing the amount of dower voluntarily. The remission of her may also be conditional. Thus, in lieu of dower, she may agree to receive annuity. No acceptance of the remission of dower on the part of her husband or his heirs is necessary. Enforcement of dower. Now we would see the enforceability of dower. It may be pointed out at the outset that the claim of the wife or widow for unpaid portion of dower is an unsecured debt due to her from her husband or his estate respectively. It ranks with unsecured debts and is actionable claim. During her lifetime, the wife can recover the debt herself from the estate of the deceased. Prompt dower can be enforced by the refusal of conjugal rights. When the prompt dower is not paid, the wife can refuse conjugal rights to the husband, and non-payment of the prompt dower is a firm defense against the husband's suit for the restitution of conjugal rights. Not only this, if on account of non-payment of dower, the wife is living separately from her husband, he is bound to maintain her. The wife can also file a suit against the husband for the recovery of the dower debt. A wife can claim maintenance when living separately for non-payment of prompt dower. Deferred dower cannot be claimed on demand. The non-payment of deferred dower, by its very nature, cannot confer the right of refusal on the wife to live with the husband. Dower can be satisfied from the estate of deceased husband. As we know that dower is a debt and the widow is entitled along with other creditors of her deceased husband to have it satisfied out of his estate. The Supreme Court of India has made following observations about it in the case of Kapoor Chand versus Qadirun Nisa. The wife is like any other creditor of the husband and cannot therefore claim priority for the dower debt over other creditors. The widow's claim for dower debt has priority over the other claims of the other heirs. The heirs of the deceased husband are not personally liable for the dower debt of the widow. The liability of an heir is to be measured not by his interest in the estate but by the assets which come into his hands. The widow's right of retention. We know that a widow can claim her dower even after death of her husband out of his estate. In this respect, a right is given to the widow which is known as widow's right of retention. Literally speaking, the right of retention is the act of withholding what one has in his hands by virtue of some right, as where a creditor pays his own claim out of the debtor's property that comes into his hands as representative of the debtor. Similarly, the Muslim law gives the widow whose dower remains unpaid a special right to enforce her demand called as widow's right of retention. The right subsists until her dower is paid off either by husband's heirs or is satisfied from the usufruct of the property that she holds. Once she loses possession of her husband's estate, she loses her special right and is in no better position than an unsecured creditor. Until it is paid, she has the right to retain possession of the property of which she has lawfully obtained possession. The widow's possession of her deceased husband's estate is considered to be lawfully held in lieu of dower where the Mehrnama provides for it, or where she has been put into such possession by her husband in lifetime or by his heirs after death. When the widow is already in possession of such property, it is presumed that it was lawfully obtained. So far as the nature of widow's right of retention is concerned, the following facts are to be taken into consideration. Number 1. Widow does not acquire any title to such property. The widow's right to retain the possession of the property in lieu of her dower is not in the nature of regular charge, mortgage, or lien. It is in essence a personal right as against heirs and creditors of the husband to enforce her right. Number 2. The widow is responsible to other heirs as she has to render accounts to them. She is entitled to some reasonable compensation not only for the labor and responsibility imposed upon her for the proper management of the estate, but also for bearing to enforce her right of the dower debt, and such compensation is in the form of interest on the principal amount of the dower. Number 3. A widow cannot alienate such property. The right of retention does not give the right to alienate property by sale, mortgage, gift, or otherwise for the satisfaction of her dower debt. Number 4. Heritability. The widow's right of retention is capable of descending to the heirs of the widow on her death. There was a diversity of judicial opinion as to whether the right to retain possession of the property by a widow in lieu of her dower was heritable. But the conflict was finally resolved by the Supreme Court by holding that the right to hold possession is heritable. This was held in Kapoor Chand versus Qadirun Nisa. Number 5. Transferability of the right. So far as the widow is concerned, she has a right to assign her dower debt, but it is unsettled whether the right to hold and retain possession of her husband's estate till dower is paid is transferable. One view is that the right to hold and retain possession of the property, being a personal right, cannot be transferred. The view has been followed in Abdul Samad versus Alimuddin. The other view is that the right to hold and retain the possession of the property as a security for the dower debt is property and therefore transferable. The widow's right of retention when extinguishes. The right is extinguished in following cases. Number 1. When the widow voluntarily gives up the possession which she once held in lieu of dower. Number 2. When the widow delivers possession of the property to third person. Number 3. When the dower debt in respect of which the right is exercised is satisfied from the usufruct of the property. Number 4. When the dower debt in respect of which the right is exercised is satisfied by payment by the heirs of the deceased. With these words, I conclude the lecture. Thank you very much.